I will now pass over to Lily for the next section.
Hi, Lily.
Hi, Andy. I just want to thank you both again for joining us today. We're really excited about this discussion. As you know, we are holding an event because the Combined Authority is deciding its priorities and works plans for the next 3 years. So we've asked young people across the region to share their own priorities by sending us their #1 questions for you as Mayor. We've received a lot of fantastic questions which cover a range of themes that will be included in the Combined Authority's 3-year plan. From jobs opportunities for young people to housing, transport and the environment. And we have chosen the top 10 to put to you today in a quick fire question and answer. Let's begin. The first 5 questions are about opportunities for young people following the coronavirus pandemic. Priya from Bilston and Wolverhampton has asked, how can we create an efficient way to bring back the economy to pre-pandemic levels?
Okay, that's not a quick fire question, Lily. That's the underlying thing of everything. Can I just say one thing though before we come to answering the questions? I mean, I'm looking forward to answering and I'm sure it'll be a great dialogue. But in a sense, I don't think that's the purpose of tonight, because what's really valuable in this tonight is hearing what you're really interested in the questioning, because that actually influences the work that we're doing on the corporate strategy, as Adam described. So of course I'll try to answer them all, but I don't think this is like the husting in a sense where it's a sort of a test of the ability to answer. It's much more about what's on your mind that's got to go into that plan. And so the very first thing I take, it was fascinating because you could have come up with anything in these quick fire questions. The very first thing I take is this first block is all about opportunities for young people. And actually, I think that's very reassuring, if you don't mind me saying, because if you look at the work we've done so far, and I will say this, what was in my manifesto, it was all about how are we going to get the region back to work, as Adam said right at the beginning, back to get the momentum that we saw pre-pandemic. And so it's great that these questions are all around that area, and there's some clues in the way the questions have come out as to what you see as important. So what I'll do is I'll try to answer them now, having given that bit of preamble. So there's so much in this, but perhaps the first 2 things I would say, because it'll sort of get people in the mindset, is first of all, we've got some God-given opportunities, or maybe given by the negotiations that have gone on over the last 3 years of getting this momentum back, because there's some really big projects here which are unique to us. So obviously the mummy and daddy of them all is HS2. So we've got to make the most of that in terms of construction jobs, the way we use it to bring business in on the back of it. And we've got to make sure that the West Midlands benefits through having that here. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is the Commonwealth Games. Just think of the number that everybody's talking about, 35,000 jobs during the actual games themselves. That's a vast number. And we're talking about 6,000 jobs long term. And just last week, we launched the business and tourism programme on the back of it to use the international focus on Birmingham and the West Midlands to promote our businesses around the world. So the sort of point I want to register is there's some real opportunities unique to us in doing this. The second point I want to register is actually there's something about which are the new sectors where we're going to see growth. Because of course we've got to get back to the ones that were doing well before, but where are the real high growth sectors? And just if you think of what we did yesterday, where we were launching our training provision for the health and social care sector, you could say the same about the whole sort of green growth and the whole sort of jobs in those new clean tech industries as well. They're areas that are growing actually faster than they were pre-pandemic, and we've got to pivot our economy towards those. That's probably the definition of efficiency in the question. And just one stat, because it'll make you think. Yesterday, we talked about 10,500 vacancies in the region in health and social care, an incredible number. And there are so many different type of careers there that can literally be from entry to incredibly ambitious and long-term fulfilling, well-paid careers. So think about the unique opportunities, and think as well about the areas where the economy is growing fastest, because the winning regions will be the ones that swing towards those areas.
Our second question is from Theophilia from Wolverhampton and Umar from Coventry, who asks, what are your plans for young people after COVID-19 and what are you doing to support young people?
Okay, so number of young people claiming unemployment benefit basically doubled during the pandemic. But the encouraging thing is the last 3 months, it has begun to come down. So we've got to work away at that. And it's the critical thing is about training opportunities. And I'll just mention a few there. Some are government schemes. And we've obviously got to make the most of them. So obviously the headline government scheme is Kickstart. And the good news is there 7,000 vacancies. And I should just give you the number, actually. There's 40 at the peak, 41,000 young people claiming benefit. So that's what we're targeting. And so some of these numbers then make sense, you see. About 7,000 vacancies currently with Kickstart across the region. OK, it's a government scheme. Our job is to work with the DWP to get as many people into it as quickly as possible. But then something I'm really proud of, which is unique to the West Midlands, about 5,000 vacancies through our college programmes that we call the terrible jargon, and we didn't get any marketing awards for this, the sector-based work academies, where we say, what are you going to do with this college to get quick experience and into a job in a growing sector? And there's brochures around that, and so to go and see exactly what schemes in the different places. And of course, one of the really exciting things that I think we've done is set up what we call our youth platforms and youth hubs. They are, the clues in the title, and they are designed to bring all the resources that young people can need to find a job and training opportunity to one place. There's a physical place in each borough, like Maryhill Shopping Centre in Dudley, where we just opened a few weeks ago, and it's also all available online. But the simple idea is everything you could possibly want to know about opportunities in the West Midlands in your borough in one place. And again, that's a unique thing here, and we're working very, very closely with the Department for Work and Pensions, aka the Job Centre, on and with the new work coaches, 350 more work coaches in the West Midlands, specifically at trying to find those new opportunities for young people. Hope that gives you a bit, Lily, in what's a huge subject.
Yeah, it was very insightful, thank you. Following on from that, Amira from Birmingham has asked, is there anything in the 3-year plan which focuses on young people to help them be more productive in employment and voluntary work?
Well, in a sense, all of this will do, actually, and I sort of want to flesh it out in the plan because lots of this already in hand. But I think it's probably, rather than me list a load of individual things, it's probably worth me saying this, because then in your breakout groups you can discuss it. What the leaders of all the authorities and I feel very strongly, and we discussed it at our recent board, was that our jobs and skills work is the single most important thing of all, with a particular focus for young people. And as I mentioned yesterday, they're launching the programme that we did for health and social care again, and that's all about exactly which college is providing which entry into this new sector. So yeah, there are so many individual elements to it, but the thing I want you to take away is it's absolutely the overriding, nothing more important mission. And if you want to help us shape that with what would be helpful to you, so if you think our youth hubs aren't user friendly, please tell us, because that's what we need to know. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the conversation you're going to have with Adam.
Great, thank you for that. Following on from what Adam touched upon with equality and diversity,
yeah.
Evie from Yardley Wood in Birmingham has asked, how do you plan on supporting the disabled community recover from the pandemic? Yeah,
so there's probably 3 things to talk about here, and this does link on to something else which is subject to separate questions a bit later on. We have been working steadily, because it's not a done job, at making our transport system accessible for disabled people. Very important, because if you can't get to the job opportunities, so any investment we make in transport is all completely disabled friendly, is probably the best way of describing it. We have been doing a targeted employment and support programs under our employment support pilot, which is particularly looking at individual placement for members of the disabled community. And of course, one of the things I'm really pleased with in terms of getting other organisations to think about their responsibilities to the disabled community, we've run this programme which is expanding that we're calling Include Me. And that's really just saying to big organisations, big employers, and it's been great to see things like the Sky Blues Foundation, the Aston Villa Foundation, the Albion Foundation trying to be neutral, all saying, yeah, we're going to think about our activities in the community being aware of issues. That's what I mean about let's include me in this as well for community. So there's a number of sort of programs that are ongoing there. But please, I would say again to Evie that I'm not pretending that's as good as it should be or a complete answer. So again, if there's any nudges about what further could be done, I'm very pleased to hear them actually.
I think I speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say that's great to hear that you're open to a lot of recommendations there.
And do remember, by the way, I mentioned Commonwealth Games earlier. It's not really about opportunities here, because not everyone's going to take part in the Paralympic, the Para Games. But there is going to be a really important statement from Commonwealth Games Birmingham that the para sports are going to be fully integrated in the programme along with able-bodied sports, rather than, as we see in Tokyo, for example, that the para games will come afterwards. And actually, I'm very proud that Birmingham is going to be doing that, because it's really making a statement about equality.
My final question before I move on to Ibrahim is Maha from Penn in Wolverhampton has asked, what actions will be taken to provide equal opportunity for students from low-income households? Yeah,
okay. So there's a lot here. I think it actually all goes back to the skills agenda, actually, and things that we're doing. So if you look at the permit me to go down a little bit of a path here, because I think this is very important, and just to explain it, if you look at the social mobility measures, which sort of says, if you're born in, let's say, in the Black Country into a low-income family, where are you likely to end up? Answer, in a low-income situation. The numbers, by the way, for Birmingham, Solihull and Coventry are much, much better. And actually, Birmingham is in the top half of local, those three authorities are all in the top half in the country for this notion of social mobility, which is something to be really proud of in those three authorities. But it's interesting that Ma is from Wolverhampton. The four authorities, the Black Country, are challenged in this way. And if you look at what tends to determine that, it is the skill level that is achieved. And that's why over a number of years, we've really been focusing on getting the skill level up, particularly in those Black Country authorities. And one of the most encouraging things, even in the depths of the pandemic, if you look at the proportion of people across the region qualified to level 3 last year, it was the best we've ever achieved, and it's growing every year. And that will be the way this is tackled over time. So all of the work we're doing in our skills agenda is around that. So if you look at how we're spending our adult education budget, for example, it's about what can we do, not just to get people trained with basic employment skills, but actually get them to level 3, which tends to give a good opportunity and tends to enable people to grow their income over time. So you can drill down on individual projects, but that's the thinking that's driving this. And actually that does, I'll be honest with you, that does drive out some choices about how you spend your money, because obviously supporting a level 3 program can be a little bit more expensive than just supporting a lot of entry level stuff. But my own view is that that is the way you drive that mobility over time. That's therefore what we're trying to do.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll pass on to Ibrahim.
Thank you, Lily. So the next set of 5 questions cover some other parts of the Combined Authority's work, such as housing, transport and the environment. So the next question is from Ben from Warsaw, who has asked, how are you helping young people to be able to afford to buy their first house?
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, hi, Ibrahim. Thank you for doing this for us. Okay, very important question. Lots of work the Combined Authority has done in this area with all of our partners in local authorities. But actually, there is an enormous amount more to do. So again, the record's stuck, but I'd be very keen to hear your ideas in the conversation as well. Let me tell you what we've done so far and what's the key objective for this next period. So the obvious point, if we build more houses in total, simple rules of supply and demand means that prices don't go up as much. And one thing that's driven us getting a lot of money from government, we've now got over £600 million from government for our housing schemes, is actually what we call the affordability ratio, looking at people's ability to pay against their salary. And we were seeing that moving against us in the West Midlands. And that's why we were arguing we needed this funding to drive up the total number of homes. And of course, something, as everybody knows, I'm very proud of, we have doubled the number of homes being built across the West Midlands in the last few years. That's the underlying point. But then you come to what is the proportion of those homes which is affordable. And what we have done is we have insisted that any funding that we give a scheme has 20% affordable. Now, you might say 20% is not that high, but it's higher than the normal strike rate for local authorities in the West Midlands. So we've pushed the average up in that way. And the bit that I'm actually particularly interested in what you think about is we've also changed uniquely in the West Midlands the definition of what affordable means. Because usually across the country, affordable relates to the price of a house. And they say it's if the price of a house is £100, affordable is 80. Very good. But of course, if the price of a house goes up to £120 on a buoyant market, affordable then goes up as well. And that can happen when people's pay hasn't moved one bit. So you actually get it further out of reach. So what we've now done is said we will relate our definition of affordable has to be 20%, remember, to what salary people actually earn. So we've said for a basic salary, as I don't know, a policeman, a newly qualified teacher, there has to be 20% affordable to those people. And developers are coming up with exactly that. So it's really exciting. So we've done all that. The next thing we intend to do, though, because it's not enough in any way, because we've still got a lot of people in temporary accommodation and things like that, we intend to strike a deal with government, and we've started the negotiations on this for an affordable housing fund. London has this, no other area of the country does, where we would then be working with our housing associations to quicken the pace of new developments, specifically for affordable developments. So we've got the beginnings of stuff, some really useful stuff, but we've got to have a breakthrough in this next period, if I'm honest, Ibrahim.
Thank you very much, Andy. So our next question is from Aisha, who's from Wolverhampton. She has asked, what policy changes are needed to reduce homelessness?
So Aisha, thank you. Very topical question. And there's two ways of answering this. There's one that I would describe as dealing with the crisis of rough sleeping, which is what people sometimes mean by homelessness. And it's the thing that is the most terrible thing to see. But there's also the underlying things. So let's talk about both. So if we're talking about rough sleeping, we've actually made real progress in the West Midlands. The number of rough sleepers is down 67% compared to 2016, and actually is down. The worst level for us was in 2018, and we're down 75% from then. And the real successful project has been a project that we call Housing First, where we've offered modest, but nevertheless individual accommodation to rough sleepers. And so far we've got 460 people across the West Midlands accommodated in that. Best in the country, unique pilot for the government. The reason I raise this is we're currently with Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, and Steve Rotherham, Mayor of Liverpool City Region, lobbying for the extension of the funding for that scheme, because it actually concluded at the beginning of July. So it's very topical. It's been an incredible success, and we need to continue to have that crisis answer. But everyone can see you can't just deal with this from a crisis point of view. You have to look at some of the underlying things. And that takes you to two things: supply of affordable accommodation, which I think we've just covered. And of course, the other thing is the whole question of, are benefits sufficient for people to stay in tenancies when they fall on tough times? And one of the good things that the government did in the pandemic, and it wasn't a huge fanfare, but it actually made a huge difference, was increase the housing benefit level to, and this is a technical point, to about 30, it's called the 30th percentile. Let me explain what I mean by it. It means that the benefit is enough to pay for about 30% of the accommodation that's available on the private rented sector in any place. Before the pandemic, the benefit was only enough to pay for 2% of the accommodation in Birmingham, but it actually has been moved up in that dramatic way. And to be really clear, we need to keep it at that sort of level. And again, we will have to press the government for doing that. So there's a welfare element to this as well. Sorry, long answer, Ibrahim, but very, very important question.
No worries, thank you very much. So Huram from Warsaw has asked, can you reduce the public transport fares for young people and make it easier for them to travel?
Okay, now I'm glad this comes up, because when we did the husting back in March, I suspect I didn't satisfy some of you with the answer on this, and I need to be really honest with you about this. So we're doing lots, let me tell you about that, But then I will also tell you why we can't make public transport free for everyone under 18, which is often the ask. And you actually haven't asked that, sir, but I do similarly just want to explain the answer to that. So first of all, lots has been done. Everyone 5 to 18 entitled to obviously half price public transport fares, and 3 years ago now we extended that for trainees and apprentices as well, and so that's made a difference there. What we've also done, of course, very recently is we've reduced so done all that for those particular discounts. Then we've tried to address fares as a whole. For 4 years, bus fares were frozen across the region, and you will know that on the 19th of July, bus fares across the region were reduced by, on average, about 20%. So day ticket, return ticket down from £4.60 to £4 as full fare, and obviously the half price ticket also reduced proportionately the same. That's taken our fares back to 2012. Inflation since 2012 has been rather a lot, and it's actually, we think, given us the lowest bus fares in the country outside London. So we've done a lot there. What we've also done is try to bring in low fare zones. So if you're in Sandwell in Walsall, that's really made, or in Dudley, that's really made a difference. And we've also used technology to improve this as well. So the fares are now capped. If you pay by a credit card or debit card or every Swift card, you cannot pay more than a maximum sum. You can use the bus as many times as you want, and the technology looks after it. So we've done a hell of a lot to bluntly make fares cheaper now on average for young people than, putting it bluntly, when I became mayor in 2017. But what we can't do is move to completely free travel. And let me just explain why, because again, this will be helpful for you in the conversation. The way all this works is the CA has a pot of money that we use for these concessions that we negotiate with National Express. Because they're not running a charity, they're running a business, let's face it. They're actually, I think, a very well-run business, and they can take their public purpose very seriously as well. But if we ask for more concessions, we have to fund it from the CA. And that money comes from our local authorities in what we call a transport levy. So if you were to say to me, scrap child bus fares, let's say that costs £50 million, we would have to raise £50 million more in our levy from our local authorities. And that means council tax in local authorities has to go up to pay that. And at the moment, there is no political will, and I understand this, anywhere for that to be done. So what we've tried to do through all those negotiations with National Express is do all those things I went through without actually taking the cost back to the taxpayer in the way in which a levy would bring about. Hopefully that's clear, Ibrahim.
Yeah, thank you very much. So our next question is from Gurpreet, who is from Wolverhampton, and they've asked, if there will be more housing and transport projects in progress, carbon emissions will increase. What will you do to help this?
Brilliant question. Very, very topical. So Gurpreet, I don't necessarily agree with you. And our mission is to make sure that you can have housing growth and transport growth, economic growth, without having an increase in emissions. And let's just explain why I say that. And it's a challenge, let's be clear. So first thing to say is actually emissions were already falling across the West Midlands with growth. Adam said right at the beginning we'd had a good run, but at the same time, our emissions had been falling by about 4% a year. Now, at least it was the right way, but it's nowhere near fast enough. Now, we've said carbon neutrality by 2041. You can all do the maths. That's 20 years away. So we need to be going rather faster than 4% a year. Because particularly, we've said we want to make the huge progress in the first half of that period. So we need to be going faster than we're currently going. But they were at least coming down. But think about how you do this. Where you put that housing really matters to emissions, doesn't it? If you regenerate a derelict old industrial area rather than digging up greenbelt, you're not. Which is more efficient in terms of carbon emissions there? Which is more efficient if you build on top of a public transport station than if again you build in the greenbelt where you need cars to transport everybody around? So there are some choices. There's also choice about what type of housing you build. If you build what we're calling net zero homes with new, very efficient modern methods of construction, which are energy efficient, it's very, very different than if you've got traditional energy inefficient homes. And we'll very shortly be moving to a deal where we're announcing our first net zero carbon homes across the West Midlands. And then if you think of transport, yes, if everybody's driving around in their petrol cars or their diesel cars, of course that's more pollution. But if we're getting investment in public transport and getting people to leave their car at home, that's efficient. And that's why the £1 billion that we've got for green public transport is really important to this challenge. And of course, ultimately, if we get to electric vehicles rather than combustion engine vehicles, that's also much better. And that's why we're determined to be the centre of the battery technology industry here. So Gurpreet, your question is spot on. It's so topical, but there are ways that you can, in the famous words, have it both ways, basically. And that's what this region's got to do and has got to emerge as a leader in that.
Thank you, Andy. So our final question is from Jamie Lee, who's from Birmingham, and they have asked, are there any plans to incorporate large park areas within city centres, and how would they be considered alongside other developments happening in cities?
Okay, this is a really interesting question, actually. I'm not dodging it, but again, it'll be helpful for you just to know this. I am not the planning authority. That remains with Coventry City Council, Birmingham City Council, Wolverhampton Council. So obviously it's something we share with them thinking about this. I think being realistic, or telling you the truth, there is no plan for to quote you, a large park area within a city centre. But that does not mean there aren't plans for a lot more green spaces within city centres. So what we're seeing in almost every development that's coming forward in big cities now is a lot more green space incorporated within the development. I'll give you a lovely example from Coventry, one I think that is truly brilliant. In perhaps one of the biggest city centre regenerations there, Abbots Lane, goes to planning in 4 weeks' time. There is a pocket park which runs right through the middle of the development, unearths a stream that had been hidden, puts planting all around it. A brilliant example of how you can have greenery together with regeneration of housing. If you look in the Birmingham plans that we were literally talking to the BBC about yesterday for Digbeth, all that's being done to expose the River Ray, make that a green urban walkway, that's being done. And then if you take the Black Country Towns Funds application, where they've just won lots of money, there's lots of green routes through those towns. Sandwell have done a particularly good example, a good job on this actually, doing those. So it's not a huge space of parkland, but it is a green sort of linkage route, and the idea is you'll be able to travel through the conurbation on these routes, and that's the way I think we're going to have to think about it, Jamie, in the middle of our city centres. What we are also trying to do, though, something very, I think, also very exciting, is trying to secure what we're calling a national park. Now, in a sense, the title of that's wrong, because it's not a national park like the Peak District or the Lake District or Snowdonia, but what it is, trying to link up around the edge of the conurbation a number of forested, wooded areas to give us a sort of a green lung, frankly, around there. And we're particularly looking at the sort of Worcestershire area for what we're calling the Seven Hills as being the first practical example of that. So it's not in the city, but it will be right on the edge of the city there. And again, I think that's right, because it helps us protect the green belt that there is there as well. There we are. Great question.
Thank you very much. So that's all of our questions for today. Now, Andy, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, I do. I have a very practical, immediate question, Ibrahim, and you don't necessarily have to answer it immediately. If you want to discuss it in your group and then give a bit of feedback at the end, that would be great. But the issue is the vaccination rates. I hope people think this is fair. The country's done a great job in vaccination, and I'm sure lots of you have, in families where elder members of the family couldn't wait to be vaccinated back at the beginning of the year. But the truth is that in all of our local authorities, we've got vaccination rates in under 25s, which are well below the national average. Actually, that's not fair. They're all below the national average, and some are substantially below the national average. And I understand that some youngsters might feel well, the COVID threat isn't that extreme for me, but it is extreme for society. And let me just explain what I mean by this. Currently, and there's no secret, and this has been in the press, the University Hospitals Birmingham has got sufficient patients, COVID patients, in their ITU wards that they are cancelling other operations because they haven't got the ITU beds for post-operation. Now that's a terrible situation, and it is largely because more mature people are going into hospital, and often they have contracted the disease from a younger member of the family who may not have chosen to be vaccinated. I'll just give you one stat. The vaccination rate in Birmingham, which is actually the lowest in the whole country for under 24s, this is a week out of date, this data, was 44%. 44% of people, lowest in the whole country, while we've got that going on in our hospitals. So, you know, you can't be proud of that, can we? So my question to you would be, what do we need to do to encourage that vaccination rate in our younger people? All authorities, not just one, all authorities to move up.
Thank you. If there's anyone in the audience who wants to share their views, then please raise your hand, or you can add a comment into the chat. I think I'll just start off answering that one by saying that we could have more incentives around getting vaccination. So I know in Warsaw, on the day of your vaccination, you can go to the Costa Coffee near the vaccination centre and get 10% off your order. And I think that's enough for anyone to want to go get a third jab if possible. So I think more stuff like that incorporated around all vaccination centres within the West Midlands will be, beneficial and will help us raise those rates.
Thank you. Lily?
Yeah, I think we're still kind of at this problem where we're tackling a lot of misinformation that we had at the beginning of the pandemic, and that is still carrying along with young people, because while older people may know people in their circles who have contracted COVID, for young people outside of school, there is a lot less people who know people who have contracted COVID or know of someone who's known someone. So I think the general consensus, and this is obviously wrong, is that young people are less prone to getting COVID. And the risk doesn't maybe feel as real to us because we're still handling this misinformation and we're not seeing any kind of tangible effects from it as young people.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know the data. I think, Evie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Yeah, I have. I think what needs to happen is perhaps if there was more care towards young people, because a lot of young people have felt neglected by COVID-19 pandemic with their mental health, with college and school grades, with every aspect of life, that they now feel that the government doesn't care about them, so why should they go and get the vaccine? And perhaps if there was more consideration and care to the younger people and more of information for them to access and more incentives drawn to them specifically, that might help them feel more encouraged to go and get it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Interesting perception. Okay. Kashmir, your hand's up.
It is. Hi, Andy. Good to see you again. Hi. And thanks for coming. I think from my perspective, it's a case of tackling two things. First of all, going about two things. First of all, obviously, trying to ensure that what's spread on social media, predominantly the misinformation and some of the just sheer ridiculousness that's got put out and has obviously spread amongst much of the population, is eliminated as quickly as possible. And then obviously, secondly, highlighting if you have your vaccine, then you can get back to as near normality as possible. Being able to see Wolves twice on the weekend, knowing I've had my first dose and felt comfortable with it, was great and a big step forward. And hopefully that encouragement of knowing that you can go back to theatres, you can go to cinemas and wherever else you feel comfortable and want to enjoy, that opportunity is there. And I think if younger folks want to be able to experience it, they should absolutely take upon it, and therefore spreading the word that a vaccine is safe, it's scientifically fine, and it gives you protection which no one could have thought we could have had not too long ago, say 20 years ago. is what's needed. So case of spreading the positive message and known vaccination rates across the country on a big level anyway. I think over 80% is impressive.
Yeah, it's 78% for 2 vaccinations across the country. No, it's not right. It's 8. Sorry, my apologies. You are right. It's 88% first vaccination, but compare that with the stat I gave you about under 24s in Birmingham. Thank you, Kashmir. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, Evie again. Do you want to come back in, Evie?
Yeah, I just had another idea. Perhaps
Please.
helping them understand why they have to do it or why this is a good idea. Because
Yeah.
a lot of the adverts at the moment were based generalized for the public, but not specifically for the younger generation. So perhaps having reasons why it's a good idea to get the vaccine and actually sitting down and reassuring to the younger generation and answering their questions and being there to reassure them and having that space where they feel comfortable to ask those unknown questions that they don't know, that they may not feel comfortable to answer, would help. And maybe having influential people who have had the vaccine talk about their experiences and spreading that message of why it's a good idea.
And I know you've got other stuff you want to get to, so I'll just ask you one last question. Would you, as members of the YCA, be happy to take part in a little bit of a PR campaign around this if we put it together reflecting what you've said? You don't have to answer me now necessarily, but you can talk about in your groups and then say at the end. But I am very conscious that young people listen to young people. They don't listen to old codgers like me. So that's why I asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind.
Okay, that's very helpful. Okay. All right.
I have 2 comments in the chat. The first one is from Priya, who says it's really important that people are reassured that the vaccine is safe. Maybe more information should be given out about the vaccine.
Thank you.
And we have a second one from Gurpreet, who says, I think that there should be a patient speaker doing events with these young people to encourage them to take the vaccine and how hard the virus is to survive in it if it gets to the worst level. If a person with experience talks to these people, they'll be understanding and will expand and motivate them to get to the vaccine.
Thank you, Gurpreet. We will reflect on what's said, and I may well, if you get anything new on it at the end of when you're feeding back with Adam at the end, please say that. But I'm going to let you to get on with the rest of the agenda, Ibrahim. Now I've taken too much airtime.
Thank you very much, Andy.